Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to this 6th Intro to Java Programming tutorial. And just a quick recap, in the first video we went over the major aspects of the Java language, including objects, classes, inheritance, interfaces, and packages. We also discussed primitive data types, and we went over the basics of program execution. In the second video we went and wrote our first few programs, so we did the Hello World program. We did some work with primitive data types and basic arithmetic, and we finished with a bill calculator program. In the third video, we went over a PowerPoint that just detailed the operators and symbols for things like arithmetic, expression evaluation, logical operators, comparison, and assignment operators. In the fourth video, I explained and we began some work with the arrays, and we use them for things like counting and printing out integers. And we briefly touched on the flow control statements, and we used one of them, the for loop, inside of our code. In the fifth video, I quickly touched on the member access controls, which are the keywords public, private, and static. And I also demonstrated the difference between the increment operator formats I++ versus ++I. So now in this video, I'm going to discuss creating and using objects and classes. We're going to be taking input from the user from the keyboard using the built-in scanner class from Java. We're also going to be introduced to the while loop, and we're going to see our first if-else statements. But the first thing I want to go over is what is called object references and object addresses. So if we open up Eclipse and we go to New, create a new Java project, and I'll just quickly name this ProjectThree and hit enter. Very creative. And we'll go to the source folder, right click, new, and select file. And we'll just name this MyObjects.java and make a comment, object reference variables and addresses. So we will declare our class MyObjects, and we will initialize our main method, public static void main string array args. And really quickly, we will create a new object of the type object. We'll name it using obj equals new object. And now we will quickly just print out that variable. So we've done this before where we've done string and gave it a name, say name equals, and then assigned something here in quotes. And then we've taken that variable name, put it here, and printed out and gotten whatever we had on this side. So in this case, when we go over here and right click and go to run as Java application, we get this weird line printed out here. So what exactly is going on with this? Well, if I bring up this here, and I can demonstrate for you what's going on. When we create a statement such as object name equals new object, we're creating, to start with, we're referencing the class type object. We're specifying a name for our object reference variable, in this case name. And then we have assignment, the new keyword, which is instantiation, which creates a address space in memory, or an object reference address. And then we invoke this object method here, which is actually called a constructor. And the constructor invocation is a specialized method used to construct an object from a particular class. And it always has the same name as a class, so object here, and it creates an object in memory at the address location created when we run instantiation using the new keyword. So again, if we do that with a string, we have string named message is initialized, is assigned new, so it's assigned an address, and we invoke the constructor and we're giving it a specific parameter, in this case, the value hello. So now if we go down here, and this little box here represents memory in our computer. So we can see this object variable name is given this strange address, which is kind of what we just saw here. And if we go back, and now that address points to a specific location in memory, similar to the way your house address would point to your house. And again, we have our string variable message, which gets its own unique location in memory. And inside of there, it points to its object with the value hello. So if we created a second string called another message, it would be given its own unique address, and that would point in memory to another object with a different value, let's say by in this case. So now using that, let's go down here. What happens if we ran this code here? So we're going to start out with our string object message and assign it hello, another string message assigned by, and now we're going to take another message variable and assign it using the message variable. So what exactly happens? Well, if we see down here, we're actually taking, rather than taking the value hello and putting it in another message's location in memory, we're actually taking the reference address from message and we're assigning it to another message. And so now another message looks at its address and it goes to memory and it sees the object that it's referencing and it pulls out this value. And here you can see the old object that another message used to point to is now marked with this red X. And the reason I did that is because now that no more arrows are pointing to this location, it is dereferenced and it can be picked up by what is called the Java garbage collector. And every so often the garbage collector will come through and it will delete any of these marked values and free up some space in memory for us. So if we go back here to our code, and we'll actually just demonstrate this really quickly. We have a string, we'll call it foo equals new string hello. And again, we've seen this part before and we've seen this, but we've actually been leaving out this new and the constructor, and the reason is that string is a little bit of a special case where we can actually get away with just simply assigning it this value. But for now, we're just going to do the longer method to demonstrate this a little bit more. So we'll make a second string called bar, new string, and say by. And now we'll print both of these out. Save it. And we'll run it. And we can see hello and bye as we normally would expect. And so now we'll go ahead and we'll take bar and assign it foo and do what we just demonstrated in that diagram, and we'll just print these out once again. So I'll copy and paste, Control S, and we'll run this. And we can see hello, bye, hello, hello. But both of these variables are now pointing to the exact same location in memory. So now we're going to jump ahead to our next program, and for this we're going to be creating a palindrome tester. And so a palindrome is any word or phrase that can be read the same way forward and backwards. So a quick example would be mom, another one would be dad, and there's a very long one. It's a phrase, a man, a plan, a canal, Panama. And if we read this, a man, a plan a canal, Panama. Of course, we're disregarding the spaces in that case, but you get the point. So to do this, we're going to go back up here to our default package, go to New, and create a new file, and we'll call this Palindrome.java. And we'll just say tests user input to determine whether or not it is a palindrome. So now we'll declare our class, public class palindrome, and our main method, public static void main string array args. And we'll start by creating our scanner object. So to do that, scanner is a class, so we're going to do scanner. And since it's a class, it starts with the capital S. And we'll name it scan equals to assign, and now we'll do new. It's going to set aside some space in memory with an address and the default constructor for scanner, so it has the same name as the class. And scanner, the constructor requires certain parameters to be put in. So if we just hover over this, well, the first thing it wants us to do is import. So we can import by clicking this link here, or I can alternately hold Control, Shift, and the letter O, and it will do the same thing. It's going to automatically import for us this package, java.util, where the scanner class is held. And so all of our files so far have gone into the default package, but we could have created our own package if we wanted to, and I kind of went over that in the first video. So for this case, we need to import the java.util package where the scanner is located. And the reason why these aren't included by default in every program is that we're not using every single possible class there is in the API. And if they were to include all of these by default, it would make our programs much, much bigger than they need to be. So this helps to cut down on size and save memory. Now again, there's still an error here, so if we highlight over it, it's saying a few quick fixes. Add argument to match scanner file, input, path, readable, string, all of these possibilities. And I'm going to manually type it out, but it's saying that we need some kind of a parameter in there. So we're going to do system.in in this case. And if we look at in, it's saying the standard input stream. This generally corresponds to keyboard input, which is exactly what we want. So now we need a few more variables. We'll do a string called str and another. And we will initialize another to the value yes. I'm sorry, I'm just going to do the letter Y. And I need to make a int left, right, count equals 0. I'm sorry, and I need a remainder also initialized to 0. And so now we're going to open up with our first while loop. And to do that, similar to the one we did with for, we're going to type the word while, parentheses, and rather than the 3 different sets of parameters that a for loop requires, the while loop only requires that we have a single value or expression that can be evaluated to true. So in this case, we're going to say while do we want string? So we're going to take while another dot, and then we'll go down here, equals ignore case, compares this string to another string, ignoring the case considerations. So no matter how the letters are arranged, as long as it's the same letters, this will match up. So another is already a string which holds the letter Y. So equals ignore case, and then it has to match some other string. So we'll say Y. We can continue this loop. So as long as another is equal to this, and it could be caps, so there's nothing to stop us from doing Y, even though this is caps and this is lower, we're ignoring the case, so these two will equal each other. They will be the same. So in that case, this evaluates to true. So while this is true, do something. And in this case, we're going to do system.out.println and ask the user to enter a string to test if it is a palindrome, and press enter. And so now we're going to use our scanner that we created before to store into this string variable str, and we're going to use the scanner object instance, and we're going to invoke a method called next line, advances past the current line and returns the input that was skipped. This method returns the rest of the current line. So we'll use that to gain the user input and store it as a string inside of str. Now, one thing, if the user had put in some numeric values, this is still going to evaluate it as a string. So if you wanted to take integer values and force them to be integers, this would actually not work. But since we're expecting string, it's okay. But say we wanted to force whatever they put in to be string, we can do something called casting. So I'll just demonstrate it now. What this is doing is saying, take whatever the user put in, and before you assign it into this variable, cast it so that it changes it or enforces that it is a string type. And so now we'll go down here. We'll say our left is going to be initialized and set to 0. And our right is going to be set to string.length -1. And I don't know where that just came from. You want string using the method length and then -1 from that. So what we're doing is here left is assigned 0, and this is going to be an index that we'll see in a minute. And then right is going to be the index of the last letter in whatever string the user put in. So if the user put in the word word, which is not a palindrome, but word is 4 letters long, W occurs at index 0, and we went over this with arrays. The next letter O occurs at index 1, R occurs at index 2, and D occurs at index 3. Or if we say length 4 -1, we get the index of the last letter. And that is what we're doing here. So we're saying the leftmost index starts at 0, the rightmost index starts at wherever the last letter occurs. The reason we're going to do that, you'll see in a minute. And we're going to create, inside of this while loop, we're going to nest another while loop. And so this one, we're going to say while string dot char at left is equal to the string dot char at right and our logical AND operator now. And then we're going to set some other test. Left is less than right. And now close that whole thing. So while we take our string and we go to the character at whatever this index is, in this case 0, while that matches or is equal to the string character located at the rightmost index. So just to demonstrate this, using MOM again, while index 0, letter there, matches the character, at the index at the far right, so M does match M, so that part is true. And while left, 0, is less than right, which in this case 0, 1, 2. So while 0 is less than 2, do this. We're going to do left plus plus, right minus minus, and add to our counter. And now, just for the sake of cleaning up our output and space it out a little bit, I'm going to print an extra line here. And now we're going to start with our first if-else statements. So if left is less than right, we're going to do system.out.print that is not a palindrome. System.out. However, there were, and then the count variable, and then say common characters on both sides. And now we can use the remainder, assign it to our string length minus 2 times our count. And that remainder is going to say how many letters or characters did not match. So now we can say system.out.println there are concatenate remain characters incorrectly matched. And so now if left is less than right, we're going to execute all of these statements between these two curly braces. Now, if this is not true, then we want to do this else statement. So if this is true, do this. Otherwise, do yes, that string is a palindrome. And then we will close out our else statement. And we'll go down here and just make another empty line. Yep. And now we're going to ask our user if they would like to continue trying more strings. So we'll do system.out.println, and we're actually not going to do println. We're going to do just our print, and for that we're going to say, would you like to try another palindrome? Y or N. And we can hit enter, and now inside another we're going to test our case. So we're going to use the scanner to get user input again. Next line, just like we did above. and store that into another. And now we get to this, which highlights here, so we know this is the end of the initial while loop. This here ends the main method, and then this ends the class. And we can save this, and now we'll just quickly right click and go down to Run As and run it as a Java application. And here we're presented, enter a string to test if it is a palindrome, and press enter. So we will do quickly MOM, hit enter. Yes. Now, would we like to try another? I'll hit the letter Y and hit enter, and it asks us again to print out another string. So I'll do BOB. Yes, that is. So now it's asking us again, but we're specifying lowercase y. But again, we checked equals ignore case. So in this case, I'm just going to put a capital Y, and it still works. And in this case, I'll do a man, a plan, a canal, Panama, and hit enter. That is not a palindrome. There were 3 common characters on both sides. There are 21 characters incorrectly matched. So I'm not really sure why that failed. But at any rate, if we now type the letter N and hit enter, the program has stopped. And we can tell because this little stop symbol is no longer highlighted. So in order to run it again, we can just quickly go up here, run it. It starts again, and we can test for another one, and let's do DAD. We'll hit enter. Yes, that is. And now we're not actually testing for anything other than whether we have Y. So even though we're saying Y or N, I can actually put in the number 8 here and hit enter, and it'll stop, because it's only testing for the case where Y is true. So as long as we keep putting in a Y, upper or lower case, all of this code will continue to loop through or execute, which is how the while loop operates. And as we demonstrated the if-else statements, one thing, you might read other people's code, so I'll just make note of this. The else statement without these brackets, and this works for if as well, if we leave those brackets out, it will immediately assume that only this statement that immediately follows it is to be included. So this would actually still work as expected, but if we tried to take that out of the if, it's only going to run this statement for this condition, and then the rest of these would actually get run regardless of whether this was true or not. And that's not what we want here. So rule of thumb, I usually, even if it's just a single statement, nest it in between these brackets. This way you're a little bit more clear about what's going to go on. And I think I will stop there, and we've covered quite a bit of material today, so I will see you at the next tutorial. Thank you.